Chapter 4.
Mom, can we go exploring today?
Jack sat across from her at the kitchen table eating homemade pancakes. And not just regular pancakes. Margie had decorated the pancakes with red syrup and whipped cream to make them look like Santa Claus. Kaitlyn yawned and checked her watch. She, Ryan, and Richard had been up late painting and wallpapering, but it had to be done in order to be dry for today. Well, Melody is supposed to be here with the furniture. His face fell and Kaitlyn hurried to continue. But let me text her and see how long she'll be. Maybe it will give us some time to hang out before she gets here. Kaitlyn tapped out a quick message to Melody and waited for a response. A moment later, her phone buzzed. Sorry, held up at the furniture store. It will be another few hours. Well, good news, bud. Melody is running late, so we have a few hours to explore. His eyes lit up.
Can we build a snowman?
Kaitlyn laughed. Sure, we can build a snowman. Finish up there and we'll get dressed for the cold. Jake proceeded to shove the rest of the pancakes in his mouth. All Kaitlyn could do was smile and shake her head. He said, his mouth still stuffed with food. Finish chewing first. Kaitlyn rolled her eyes and washed her mug out in the sink. She smiled as she set the mug, decorated like a Christmas tree, on the counter.
All done.
Jack opened his mouth to show her it was empty.
Can we go outside now?
Yes, baby bear. Come on, let's get you layered up. On the way to their room, Kaitlyn stopped at Ryan and Richard's room. She was pleased to see the brothers up and dressed when they opened the door. Melody is going to be a little late. Do you think you guys could do the mantle this morning?
Sure, Ryan said. We'll get started right after breakfast.
Thank you. Kaitlyn continued down the hall to the sunshine room. After adding a jacket, gloves, and a hat to Jack, she led the way outside. The snow was blindingly white, and Kaitlyn wished she had remembered a pair of sunglasses.
There's so much snow,
Jack said, the awe evident in his voice as he looked around. Yep, plenty of snow to build an amazing snowman, so let's get to it. Kaitlyn bent down and began rolling up the snow into a ball. Jack quickly joined in, and the two were soon laughing and giggling as the ball of snow grew. When the bottom layer was finished, they began rolling the second. But when it was done, Kaitlyn realized too late that it was too heavy for her to lift.
Does that mean we can't finish?
Jack's face was a painting of disappointment.
Maybe I can help.
Kaitlyn turned around to see Julian behind them. Oh, we couldn't. I know for a fact this isn't in your job description. He smiled and glanced back at the lodge.
No, but I know Mrs. Fields would have my hide if I could have helped, but sent a young boy back inside without a snowman.
Please, Mom. He can help us real quick and then get back to work.
Fine. Kaitlyn held up her hands. I am clearly outnumbered.
I'm glad you came around.
Julian squatted down on one side of the ball of snow and Kaitlyn took the other. Between the two of them, they were able to heft the heavy ball onto the low body. Jack raised his fist in triumph.
Yes, just one more to go.
My advice is don't make the head too large, or you'll have the same problem.
Julian flashed her a wink before disappearing around the side of the lodge. Okay, so a wink usually meant interest. The question was she interested back?
Come on, Mom, let's finish the head.
Kaitlyn dragged her eyes back to her son and smiled. Right, the head. How could I forget? They rolled up a smaller ball of snow, and this time Kaitlyn was able to muscle it up herself. The snowman was eye level with her when they finished. Okay, kiddo, I'm getting cold. You ready to head in?
Yeah, I guess. Can we come back out again later? Maybe give him a scarf and a hat?
She smiled down at him and grabbed one of his gloved hands.
Sure, we can probably do that.
They headed back into the lodge, and after taking off their boots, coats, gloves, and hats, they wandered into the kitchen.
Did you two have fun out there?
Margie asked as they entered. She sat at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pen. Her sweater was red and fuzzy.
Yeah, it was fun. I want to go out again. Well, perhaps your mother will let you come with me later. I'm filling out a grocery list and need to run into town.
Jack nodded and turned to Kaitlyn.
Can I, Mom?
Kaitlyn smiled at Margie. Whether the woman was just being nice to Jack, or whether she was thinking of Kaitlyn and the work ahead of her this afternoon, Kaitlyn was grateful.
Of course you can. Do you have any hot chocolate, Margie? I sure could use a little warm-me-up. Certainly, dear, in the cupboard above the stove. Can I have some too?
Jack asked.
With marshmallows?
Kaitlyn chuckled as she opened the cupboard. Jack loved marshmallows. He was always bugging her to buy them in the store, and more than once she caught him sneaking into the bag. S'mores were his favorite treat, and if she let him pick the cereal, it usually had marshmallows in it.
You're in luck. It seems there is a package up here with little marshmallows.
She took the 2 packets down along with 2 mugs and set the kettle to boiling on the stove. When it whistled a few minutes later, she filled the mugs and brought them back to the table. Jack thanked her and cupped his small hands around the mug, blowing on the steam as it rose to send it spiraling away. Kaitlyn smiled as she sipped her own mug. She hated that Jack had no father figure in his life, but she was so glad she had gotten him away from her abusive ex-husband before he could be scarred by it. Perhaps one day God would send her the right man, and Jack could have a second chance at a father. It was late in the afternoon when Melody arrived. She entered the lodge looking frazzled and stressed.
What took so long?
Kaitlyn asked.
The traffic was horrendous. Did I mention I don't like traffic? And I like it even less in a big U-Haul truck.
Melody had grown up in a small town in Texas, and though Denver was no small town, she had developed a routine of driving to work, stores, and the park. Kaitlyn knew she avoided the interstate at all costs.
Well, thank you for coming. It was well timed. As you can see, we cleared out the room yesterday and got the wallpaper hung and the other walls painted last night. Ryan finished the mantel about an hour ago. Once we get the furniture in that you have, I'll just need to find whatever pieces are missing and decorate.
Did I hear someone say they needed furniture unloaded?
Ryan asked, entering the room.
Yes, Melody has arrived with the U-Haul.
Great. I'll go get Richard and we can get started. I'd be happy to help too,
Julian said. Kaitlyn hadn't even heard the door open, but there he stood in the doorway.
Who's the hunk?
Melody whispered as she leaned closer to Kaitlyn. As Melody had worked with Ryan and Richard before, Kaitlyn assumed she was talking about Julian.
Thanks, Julian, Kaitlyn said. This is my friend Melody.
Pleased to meet you,
he said with a nod.
You as well.
Melody's words sounded breathless, and her eyes never left Julian's. Kaitlyn rolled her eyes. Melody was like a window shopper of men. She bounced from one to another like a socialite following the latest trend. Thankfully, Richard and Ryan returned then, and the group headed outside to the truck. Melody handed over the key, and Ryan unlocked the back and rolled up the door. The U-Haul was stacked with couches, lamps, tables, paintings. Kaitlyn even saw a few pillows.
Did you get everything?
She asked Melody.
That's a full truck.
Almost, Melody said with a smile.
You did a great job securing everything. All I had to do was pick it up.
Well, let's get started unloading it,
Ryan said as he pulled out the ramp and then climbed into the back of the truck. They started with the little pieces that were closest to the back. Even Kaitlyn and Melody were able to help with the lamps and pillows. Soon they hit the heavier items, and the girls stayed in the living room and designated where each piece should go. Melody had found 2 perfect couches, which Kaitlyn arranged to face the fireplace. They had the perfect view of the new mantel Ryan had constructed. A repurposed wood coffee table fit nicely in between them.
That's all the furniture, Kaitlyn, Ryan said. Is there anything else you need Richard and I for?
No, it seems all we have left to do is hang pictures and decorate for Christmas. Thank you again for your help on such short notice.
She held out her hand and Ryan shook it.
Always a pleasure to do business with you, Kaitlyn.
That goes for me as well,
Richard said, shaking her hand before following Ryan out of the lodge. Kaitlyn surveyed the room. With the furniture neatly arranged, she could now see where the pictures needed to go.
Is there anything I can do to help?
Julian asked. Kaitlyn jumped when she realized he was just behind her.
Yes, can you get a hammer and nails so Melody and I can get the pictures hung?
It would be my pleasure,
he said, before throwing her a wink and exiting the room.
I think someone likes you,
Melody teased as the door closed behind him. Heat flared across Kaitlyn's face.
I'm sure he's just being nice. Uh-huh. Well, I wish he'd be that nice my direction. I mean, it's not like you date. I date,
Kaitlyn said.
When was your last one?
Melody asked, hands on her hips.
It was...
Kaitlyn thought, but she couldn't remember her last date.
Never mind. My love life isn't up for discussion. We need to finish this room so I can begin decorating.
Julian reappeared a few minutes later with a hammer and some nails. He patiently waited while Kaitlyn decided which picture needed to go where, and then hammered in the nail and secured the picture.
Well, this looks wonderful,
Margie said, as she entered the room with Jack right behind her. Kaitlyn and Melody had just finished hanging the last picture.
I was coming to check on progress, but it appears you will definitely be done in time for the photographer.
Kaitlyn surveyed the room once more. Everything had come into place nicely. The walls had been spotless, so hanging the wallpaper and repainting had occurred quickly. The mantel for the fireplace drew the eye's attention, and all of the pieces Melody had brought fit her vision to a T. It looked cover-worthy, and the only thing left to do was decorate it for Christmas.
Yes, Margie, I believe we will.
Wonderful.
Well, I'm going to take some guests down to town. They want to know the best places to shop, and since I need to get groceries, I figured this would be a good outing for everyone. I'll keep Jack with me. We'll be back later.
She turned to Julian.
Can you get a van ready to drive us?
Of course, Mrs. Fields,
he said, before ducking out the front door. Melody glanced at her watch.
I should get going, too. I need to get back to Trixie before she tears the place up. Do you think you can come back tomorrow? We can probably finish in a few hours.
Sure thing. As everyone left, Kaitlyn wandered into the kitchen to make a cup of tea and have a light snack. Margie said they were low on food, but she had made a batch of Christmas cookies earlier in the day. Kaitlyn had been too busy to have one earlier, but she was pleased to see one lone cookie still sitting on the plate. As she sipped her tea and nibbled her cookie, she thought about how she wanted the room to look. With the rustic decor, gold would look exceptionally good in the room. But then she couldn't put icicles on the tree. Unless they made gold ones. She'd have to check the town out herself if she didn't find any. She finished the cookie and tea and washed the cup out in the sink. time to get decorating. Kaitlyn knew Margie had a ton of Christmas decorations around somewhere, but unfortunately, she was in town shopping. Kaitlyn pursed her lips. There had to be an attic or a basement somewhere, but she couldn't remember ever seeing it. Then she remembered the old sunroom. The guests rarely used it, but she and Dillon often had. It was a perfect room for them to kick off their muddy or snow-covered boots before entering the rest of the lodge. And if Kaitlyn remembered correctly, there was a shelving unit full of boxes in that room. In fact, other than a shelf for their shoes and a small table, the shelving unit had been the only other thing in the room. Kaitlyn had often wondered what was in those rows of boxes, and now seemed the perfect time to find out. The room was at the back of the lodge, and the outside sun spilled in through the large windows as Kaitlyn entered. Sure enough, the room was exactly as she had pictured it. Rows and rows of boxes still lined the shelf across the far wall of the room. Kaitlyn sighed. She had no idea where to start, and none of the boxes were labeled. How in the world did Margie know what was in them? Perhaps the better question was, did Margie know what was in them? She pulled the closest box out and opened the lid. Neatly folded towels sat on top. Kaitlyn placed the box on the floor and gently dug underneath the towels, but that appeared to be all that was in the box. She folded the top back down and replaced it on the shelf. One down and only about 20 more to go. Dillon pulled into the lot of the lodge and looked around in surprise. Where were all the cars? This was normally the busy time of year for the lodge, from mid-November to New Year's, but there were few cars in the parking lot. He parked the truck and grabbed his bags from the back. The snow crunched under his feet as he walked to the entrance. The front door was unlocked, as usual. Though near Keystone, the lodge was far enough from the main town that people didn't usually stumble upon it without knowing where it was. So they left the door unlocked. "Hello," Dillon called, as he pushed open the door and stepped into the foyer. The foyer held a small waiting area and a front desk that an employee generally manned, but today the desk was empty. "Hello?" He stepped through the archway into the living room. His eyes widened as he took in the decor. His mother must have hired someone to update the room, as he could still smell the faint odor of fresh paint. And he certainly didn't remember some of the pieces of furniture. Now, if only she would let someone redo the guest rooms and kitchen as well. While he knew his mother kept busy, he also knew she could get more customers and raise her rates if she updated the lodge. And speaking of his mother, where was she? His father had passed away a few years ago, but his mother was usually flitting around the lodge making small talk and cups of tea. But today there was no sound. He wandered into the kitchen, but it too was empty. Curious, but his bags were getting heavy. He could investigate after he dropped them off, so he made his way back to the front desk and opened the logbook to see what was available. His mother used to keep one of the rooms open for him, but when he had stopped coming home every Christmas, she had informed him he would have to reserve one like every other guest. He just hoped she had an empty one. He scanned the entries, glad to see one room open. It wasn't his favorite room, but at least it wasn't the sunshine room. He'd always hated the colors of that one. After jotting his name down so his mother wouldn't fill the room, he headed up the stairs. The forest room was at the far left end of the hall. Dillon pushed open the door and sighed as the solid green walls attacked him. Why his mother had ever insisted on giving each room a color theme was beyond him. However, the bed was made and the room would do while he was here. He hoisted his bags on the bed, but decided he would unpack them later. His stomach rumbled as he made his way back to the kitchen, and he opened the fridge to see what goodies his mother had stored. Surprise colored his face as the mostly bare fridge stared back at him. Maybe his mother was shopping in town. She definitely couldn't feed guests with what was in here. A few condiments, some meat and cheese, and a loaf of bread. Dillon had been hoping for more, but a sandwich would have to do for now. Perhaps he could beg her to cook a big dinner tonight. He took 2 slices from the bread bag and placed them on a paper towel. Then he opened the drawer where the silverware was kept. His fingers had just grasped the knife when he heard a loud thud. Quickly, he bypassed the butter knife and grabbed a sharper knife, clutching it tightly. With quiet footsteps, he made his way out of the kitchen and toward the back of the house where the sound had come from. Guests rarely went back there, as it was more of the family living part of the house. Darn it! The female voice was followed by another crash, and Dillon burst into the sunroom. Don't move! He held the knife up in a threatening position, hoping he wouldn't have to actually use it. The woman screamed, dropped the box in her arms, and turned around. A vice grip squeezed Dillon's lungs, and the hand holding the knife lowered to his side. Kaitlyn? Dillon? Shock threaded her voice, and he knew the confused expression on her face must mirror his own. Kaitlyn Bell back in front of him? Was this fate? What are you doing here? He kicked himself mentally. That wasn't what he wanted to say. Why were words failing him now? I could ask you the same question. Her hands curled into fists and jammed onto her slim hips. Dillon smiled at the way her chin tilted up and to the right when she was angry. Your mother said you wouldn't be here. That was odd, considering his mother had sent him an email about the party in a few days. But he decided to play dumb until he knew what was going on. I hadn't planned to, but my schedule opened up. She shook her head, sending her dark locks swirling about her shoulders. Well, this isn't going to work. I took this job because your mother assured me you would be gone. Her eyes were fierce, not the warm chocolate depths he remembered from high school. Dillon set the knife on the fireplace mantel and stepped toward her. What job? Kaitlyn leaned down and began picking up the doilies and tablecloths that had spilled from the box. Your mother hired me to redecorate the living room of the lodge. I'm almost done here, but the photographer will be here in a few days. I don't need a distraction. She considered him a distraction? Did that mean she still had feelings for him as well? Dillon dropped to the floor and helped her gather the loose items. Mother didn't know I was coming. I didn't tell her, but I'll stay out of your way. You won't even know I'm here. That was not what he wanted at all. But it appeared Kaitlyn still harbored hard feelings from their last encounter. Thank you, she said as she took the items from him, but her voice was still cold, controlled. She stood up and her eyes raked over him. I don't know, Dillon. I have a hard time believing you'll stay out of sight. He traced the pattern of an X across his chest and flashed his most charming smile at her. Cross my heart. She let out an enormous sigh and rolled her eyes. Fine. Well, as long as you're here, maybe you can help me. Dillon issued a small bow. It would be my pleasure, mademoiselle. Kaitlyn shook her head and rolled her eyes. Do you know where your mother keeps the Christmas decorations? Is that what you're looking for? He eyed the shelf. I don't think she keeps them here.
Kaitlyn sighed. I have no idea where else to look except her closet, but I don't feel right going in there.
Me neither, he said with a laugh.
Why does your mother have so many towels and tablecloths anyway? That's all I found in every box.
Dillon shook his head.
She likes to have something for every season, I guess.
His stomach rumbled, reminding him he had never finished his sandwich.
Listen, I don't know when Mother will return, and there is nothing in the fridge to eat. What do you say we go grab a pizza to kill some time? You can ask her about the Christmas decorations when we get back.
Kaitlyn bit her lip, and he could sense her hesitation.
It's just pizza, Kaitlyn. Nothing more. And you have to eat, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
Her words came out slowly, as if every word was a challenge.
Look, if you're afraid of being out with me, then I'll go pick one up and bring it back. How's that?
Dillon was hoping a little reverse psychology would work on her. Maybe if he acted like he didn't care, she would. He bit back a smile when it worked. She shook her head.
No, it's fine. We can go get food. I'm hungry myself. I had a cookie earlier, but it didn't fill me up.
You had a cookie? I didn't see any in the kitchen.
That's because I had the last one.
She flashed a smile at him.
Just let me change real quick.
Sure.
He wanted to freshen up a bit as well.
Meet you up front in 15?
All right.
They both headed down the hallway that led to the rooms, and then she turned right as he turned left. He reached his door first, but waited just a moment to see which room she turned into. A slight chuckle escaped his lips as he saw her duck into the sunshine room. Dillon knew Kaitlyn hated the color yellow. He pushed open his own door and closed it behind him. After rifling through his bags for his toiletries and a clean sweater, he stepped into the bathroom. There wasn't quite time for a shower, but a thorough brushing of his teeth and a new application of deodorant made him feel like a new man. He splashed a little cologne on his neck and ran a brush through his hair. The brown sweater brought out the green in his eyes and accented the dimple in his left cheek that Kaitlyn used to love. Grabbing his wallet on the way out, he headed to the living room to wait for Kaitlyn. She appeared a moment later in a mint green sweater and a pair of jeans. Her porcelain skin radiated, and his heart skipped a beat in his chest.
Your car or mine? He asked as he opened the door.
Mine. I've seen you drive.
She flashed a teasing smile and pushed past him to her SUV. Dillon shook his head and pulled the door shut behind him before following her. Kaitlyn gripped the steering wheel and took a deep breath while she waited for Dillon. Her heart hammered in her chest like a jackhammer breaking up concrete. Dillon Fields, in the flesh and still as handsome as ever. How in the world was she going to focus on the remaining work with his sultry smile and twinkling green eyes haunting her vision? Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. If she could focus on anything other than how good his chest looked in his sweater and how warm his arms had once been, then maybe she could get him to help her out. With his help, she would be able to finish faster and get back to her life away from him. The problem was, he looked too good in that sweater. It showed off his strong chest, and his jeans hugged his body in all the right places. Her traitorous heart sped up at the very sight of him, and her brain reminded her again this wasn't a good idea. But she was hungry, and it was just food. She would have to eat sometime. He opened the passenger door and climbed in. A whiff of polo sport drifted in along with the cool air from outside. A tremble raced through her body. That had been her favorite cologne on him when they were in high school. The smell alone always made her melt, but coupled with his masculine scent, it drove her crazy. This had definitely been a bad idea. The passenger door shut and he tapped the dash. "Shall we go?" Kaitlyn shifted to face him.
"This isn't what I planned, Dillon, and I have to stay a few more days to finish the work, so I think we should make some rules."
His brow furrowed as he buckled his seatbelt and turned to her.
"Rules? Okay. What are you thinking?"
Kaitlyn hadn't actually gotten that far.
"Well, for one, we keep this strictly business."
Dillon nodded.
"Okay, that I can do."
2, we retire to our separate rooms after sundown and remain there until sunrise at least.
That seems a little drastic and Brady Bunch-esque, but okay. Unless my mother requests my presence. Anything else?
I'm not sure, but I reserve the right to add more.
Whatever you say.
He shook his head, but the corners of his lips pulled up in a smile. Kaitlyn hated that he thought she was kidding. This was the only way she knew to keep herself from falling for him all over again. With a shake of her head, she started the SUV. The sooner they got to the restaurant, the sooner she could get a reprieve from the intoxicating scent and the masculinity drifting her way. 15 minutes later, they were seated at a booth in Gitano's pizza place, waiting for their food. But the reprieve Kaitlyn had hoped for was nowhere to be found. Yes, the scent was a little less, and what lingered was masked with the smell of cheese and pizza sauce. But now she had to battle the memories as well. Gitano's had been their Friday night date destination after the football games, or before, if they were late ones. Everywhere she looked, images of the past surfaced. In the booth across from them was where he had shown her his senior ring.
"So, Kaitlyn, I got something a few days ago."
"Oh, really?"
She batted her eyes as she looked up at him. Kaitlyn knew he had received his senior ring a few days ago, and today she was hoping he would ask her to go steady and give it to her.
"Yeah, I know we've been dating for a few months, but I can't imagine wanting to date anyone else."
He pulled something out of his pocket.
"I wanted to know if you would be my girlfriend and wear my ring."
Dillon held out a small gold chain that held an enormous class ring. The blue stone filled most of the middle surface, and there was a football on one side and a baseball on the other.
"I'd love to."
She ducked her head and he put the necklace over her hair. It fell against her chest, a heavy symbol of their love. And across the room was the party section where they had met with a group of friends before prom senior year. Kaitlyn smoothed the sea foam satin of her dress and looked around the room. Who had suggested dinner at a pizza restaurant before prom? Not only was she worried about dinner causing her to puff up and be bloated, but she didn't want to spill anything on her dress. It was a rental that she had paid nearly $100 to rent for the night. She couldn't afford to spill anything on it, especially not something like pizza sauce that might never come out.
"Dillon, are you sure this is a good place to eat before dancing?"
"I don't know," he said with a laugh. "But we're here, so we might as well."
She was not convinced, but she followed him into the party room where several of their friends were already waiting.
"Penny for your thoughts,"
Dillon said from across the table. Kaitlyn shook her head to clear the past and focused on the man in front of her. Time had only made him more handsome, his features a little more chiseled.
"You couldn't afford my thoughts,"
she said, before dropping her eyes to her drink. In reality, she didn't want to share. She didn't want him walking down memory lane with her.
"Maybe not."
He paused, as if unsure what to say next. Then a smile lit his face and he leaned across the tabletop as if sharing a secret.
Hey, do you remember when we ate here before prom? Whose dumb idea was that?
I don't know, Kaitlyn said, in a tone much harsher than she meant. But let's not talk about the past. She looked down at her watch. When was the pizza going to arrive? She could almost feel her heart stretching tendrils out and attaching once again to Dillon. But she wasn't sure she could survive another heartbreak. Plus, there was Jack to think about now. Kaitlyn couldn't date any man she couldn't see being in Jack's life.
Okay.
He stretched the syllables of the word out as if he was unsure why the topic was off limits and leaned back.
So let's talk about the present. What have you been up to?
Just opening my design business. It is what I went to college for.
Kaitlyn,
She cut him off, knowing the next words out of his mouth were going to be some kind of apology. But she didn't want to hear them. Not now, anyway. What could he apologize for? For wanting to see the world after high school? For never coming back? For breaking her heart and sending her running into the arms of a man she should have known to stay away from? You know what? I'm just going to check and see what's taking our pizza so long. Before he could answer, she scooted out of the booth and approached the counter. At least the distance would give her a moment to compose herself. She felt as if she were on a roller coaster. 1 minute she was at the top, enjoying the view, and the next she was barreling down into the painful past, where Dillon walked away from her to go see the world. "Can I help you?" The bored voice of the male employee manning the counter grabbed her attention. "Just checking on order number 12. Any idea how much longer?" She smiled sweetly at the teen who would obviously rather be somewhere else. He sighed but turned and checked the silver wheel holding the orders.
"Looks like it's in the oven," he said to her. "So another few minutes."
"Thank you," Kaitlyn said. She tapped the counter as she thought of how else to pass the time. Bathroom. She could hide out for a bit in the bathroom. Kaitlyn turned back toward Dillon and smiled. "It will just be another few minutes. I'm going to wash my hands." She hurried into the bathroom and leaned against the closed door. How on earth was she going to get through this night and the next 3 days? She pushed away from the door and walked to the mirror. Her wide eyes stared back at her. "You can do this, Kaitlyn. It's just dinner with an old friend. Just think of it like that. You're just friends." After another few deep breaths, she squared her shoulders and returned to the booth, pleased to see the pizza had arrived. She slid into her seat. "Oh, good. The pizza is here."
"Yeah, it looks like you wasted just enough time so that we didn't have to converse anymore,"
Dillon said with a wink, as he placed a slice of Canadian bacon and pineapple pizza on his plate. Kaitlyn had never understood how he ate fruit on pizza. Her own half held pepperonis and cashews. "I wasn't," Kaitlyn began, but he had caught her. There was no point denying it. "I'm sorry," she sighed, and dropped her face to hide the red flush she felt. "I just don't know how to talk to you anymore. It's been so long."
"Then let's not talk. Let's just eat."
Kaitlyn smiled gratefully and picked up her own slice. The rest of dinner passed without incident until the check arrived. The server only brought one, and she and Dillon looked at each other. "I could ask them to separate it," Kaitlyn offered.
"No, I ruined your work trip. This can be my treat."
She wanted to object more, but the stubborn glint had appeared in Dillon's eye, and she knew further arguing would be pointless. Besides, she just wanted to get back to the lodge and hole up in her room where she could process the day. "All right, this time." Dillon whipped out his wallet, and a few minutes later they exited the warm building into the cold, snowy air. Brr! Kaitlyn wrapped her arms around her, wishing she had grabbed her coat instead. The temperature had dropped quite a few degrees when the sun went down. Luckily, her car heated up quickly, and the drive back was short.
Wow, the snow is really coming down, Dillon said beside her. Are you sure you're okay to drive?
She turned to him with raised eyebrows. Who's the one who stayed in Colorado? I think I can drive in the snow better than you, Mr. Jet Setter. He held his hands up in a display of retreat.
I was just offering. I remember how you drove in high school.
Shut up. She punched his shoulder and he grimaced and rubbed it.
Wow, I don't remember you hitting so hard. You've been taking self-defense or something?
He was kidding. It was written all over his face. But his words hit Kaitlyn and stole the playful moment. He had no idea what had happened to her. She had never told him. But why would she? Dillon had been out of her life for years when... No, she wouldn't go down that path again. It was in the past, and it had made her stronger. Let's just go. Dillon's smile faltered, and she could read the confusion in his eyes. But he shrugged and followed her to the car. The ride back to the lodge was quiet. Kaitlyn gripped the steering wheel tightly, partly because of the emotions rattling inside her, and partly because of the weather. Though she had put on a brave face, she didn't enjoy driving in the snow. The white flakes were beautiful when she could sit and watch them fall, but they were very distracting when driving. Relief flooded her when they arrived unharmed in the lodge's parking lot once more. She turned off the engine and opened the driver's side door.
Kaitlyn, wait,
Dillon said from the passenger seat. She glanced at him, but shook her head. Can't. See? The sun has set. It's time to be in our separate rooms. Need to get some sleep. I have a long day tomorrow. Before he could say anything else, she jetted out of the car and into the lodge. Oh, hello, Kaitlyn. Kaitlyn heard Margie's voice, but she didn't stop until she was safely in her room and the door was shut behind her.
Hey, Mom,
Jack said, looking up from his tablet at her.
We had so much fun. Did you know they have an ice rink?
Kaitlyn sat on the bed and forced a smile on her face as she breathed deeply to calm her heart rate. She was going to have to find a way to distance herself from the memories of the past, or she would never be able to get this job done. Lord, please help me get through the next few days. No, that's great, honey. I'm glad you had fun. Dillon sighed as he exited Kaitlyn's car. His breathing sent plumes of condensation into the air, which curled into smoke like tendrils before disappearing into the swirling snow. He opened the door to the lodge, his shoulders low as if weighted by an invisible force. Dillon? He looked up to see his mother staring at him.
Hi, Mom.
I suppose that explains Kaitlyn's reaction then. His mother looked toward the stairs where undoubtedly Kaitlyn had gone, retreating to her room.
Why did you tell her I wouldn't be here and then send me an invitation to your party?
His mother raised a brow at him. Well, for one thing, I didn't know you would be here. I've invited you many times to gatherings, and you never show up. Dillon ducked his head. He had been too busy to come home as often as he should. However, now that his business wasn't doing nearly as well in Florida as it used to, he no longer had an excuse.
Okay, that's true, and I'm sorry, but what's the other reason?
I figured if you did decide to come, it wouldn't be until the day of or the day before the event, and Kaitlyn would have been gone by then.
Should I leave then? I mean, until she's done?
Dillon didn't want that at all. He wanted a second chance with Kaitlyn.
Is that what you want to do? His mother asked.
No. He shook his head. I've realized the last few days that I still care for her, as more than a friend. I want to date her again.
A wide smile spread across her face and she clapped her hands.
Oh, good. I was hoping you would say that. I've been praying you would wake up for years. But there's something you should know.
What's that?
She has a son, Jack. He's 5.
Dillon ran a hand across his chin.
A son? Did that mean there was a husband? Surely not. His mother wouldn't have been so excited if there was a husband. But a kid? Dillon was sure he still had feelings for Kaitlyn, but throwing a child in the mix changed things a little. I'm assuming there's no man in her life, though.
No, though I didn't ask what happened. Does her having a son change your mind?
Did it? He wasn't sure. I don't think so, he said, but I'll need to think on it to be sure.
Yes, of course you should.
She patted his hand.
However, I think we should still discuss a plan.
Dillon chuckled at her enthusiasm, and the two retired to the kitchen to brainstorm ideas.